Welcome to our webinar today. Thank you for joining us. This is a webinar on CMHC MLI Select program and how you qualify for the loan program and the mortgage guarantee program through the accessibility requirements. Our partner here on this webinar today is Handy Help. We have Chris here, which is going to take over most of and do most of the talking for this webinar. Just a quick introduction at the beginning. For those of you who don't know, my name is Payam Nur Salahi. I run a company called Data Project Management. We have a website in which we do also a whole bunch of training and educational content on midrise.ca, which is basically our hope and our mission is to empower a new generation of real estate developers who come in and hopefully focus on the mid-rise side of the market. As an extension of that midrise.ca, we also run a podcast, realestatedevelopmentinsights.com. That's our website for the podcast, which is an extension of midrise.ca. And in this webinar, we're trying to basically help educate myself and you and hopefully people who watch this afterwards with the MLI Select process and how you can get benefit from these programs that the government has put in place to get more projects going. Before we start, we just want to ask a few questions from the audience, which you should be able to see in your chatbot there, just for us to get a sense of who you are, what is your level of familiarity with CMHC program and stuff like that. So please take a minute, respond to those questions in chat box. See, more people are rolling in, so please feel free to answer the quiz or the poll in chat box. The second question is, how familiar are you with this whole program? So that gives us a little bit of an idea of how much time to spend on which section. Last one. If you have used MLI Select program and CMHC funding before, what was your biggest challenge? Okay, so it seems like we have more architects in our mix right now, and the familiarity level is pretty good, so we don't need to dive too much into the details of it. And accessibility criteria. Okay, so that's why we're here. That's why Chris is here. He's the authorities, if not one of the authorities on the topic. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, you get much better sense of what the requirements are and how we go about it. Just a reminder, this is a three-part webinar series. This is the first part. The second part is going to be about the financial requirements, and the third part about energy efficiency requirements. We're going to have links to the second webinar at the end of this presentation, which will provide you, and you can feel free to sign up. It's a free presentation. And what is the CMHC Select program? In a nutshell, it's government's way of encouraging lenders to lend money to private projects to help with the housing crisis that we have right now. CMHC does not lend by itself. They basically provide insurance to private lenders and whoever wants to lend on these projects, which has to go through certain criteria. In the second webinar, we're going to dive into that in more detail with Canada ICI. We have a good team there. And the pillars of the program are affordability, energy efficiency, and accessibility requirements. That's basically government's way of incentivizing better buildings and better projects to be built. And as a result of that, if you manage to meet those requirements to whatever degree, which Chris is going to walk us through some of that today, you can benefit from a whole bunch of financial incentives in terms of LTVs, in terms of basically how much money can you get on each project, what is your amortization, what are your rates, and a whole bunch of technical financial stuff, which again, we're going to cover in the second webinar. And with that said, I hope that's just enough for us to get the conversation started. I'll turn it over to Chris. And Chris, of course.
Thank you, Pam, for inviting me today and having me on. And thank you to everybody online who's listening for taking the time during your lunch break to listen to this podcast. So my name is Chris Stigas, and I'm the founder of Handy Help. We're going to be talking about what is accessibility, what is an accessibility analysis, what's the difference between different CMHC requirements. I'll speak briefly about the CSA standards, the two of them, B651-23 and B652-23, and then universal design as opposed to accessible design. We're going to go through some of the Rick Hansen Foundation requirements for certification, and which are based on the MLI Select level 1 and level 2 requirements, depending on how many points you need. And then we'll get into the very difficult topic of visitability and what that means, and try and answer your questions. And then finally, I'll just go through some of the process of how everything works, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Just Chris, just before you dive in, for everyone, you should be able to type into the chat box that you see on the screen with your questions. Feel free to type it in as we go through it, and we will have a Q&A session at the very end. But as we go through the slides, feel free to type in, and I might just jump in and interrupt Chris's presentation. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. So my background is commercial industrial electrician, and I have over 20 years of experience with construction and reading blueprints and exactly what goes in behind the drywall. And I'm familiar with AODA legislation and building code. I've taken the Rick Hansen accessibility certification training, and I'm also a Rick Hansen certified professional. And over 10 years ago, I had a spinal cord injury, and so now I have the kind of perfect trifecta combination of construction background, academic training, and lived experience to be able to make recommendations. What's the main idea of an accessibility analysis? Really, what we're looking for is, can a person with a disability safely get to your site as a pedestrian? Can they use municipal transit? And can they get there using a vehicle? Can they actually get into your building? And then once they're inside your building, can they get meaningful information about the services and the layout of the building? Can they access all the floors and amenities offered within your building? Can they use the washroom? And can they get out in an emergency? So those are the core things that we're rating when we go through an accessibility analysis. Originally, there was the CSA standard, which was B651-18. And then in 2023, they came out with a new standard, B651-23. And then this time they added a second book to that, B652-23, and B652-23 deals specifically with residential units. And it offers more detail for room dimensions and how to place furniture, for instances in the bedroom, best practices for lighting controls, heights, where they land, let's say in the bedroom, and then some design strategies on universal design and for people, what to put in a unit for people that want to age in place. Even though in the MLI Select context, it doesn't specifically mention B652-23, within B651, it points to the criteria in B652 for the residential units. Universal design versus accessible design. So I'll give you a quick, easy example. There's a path of travel to the outside of a building, and this path of travel that leads to the front door has a set of stairs, and beside the stairs is a ramp. That would be accessible design, where people that are ambulatory would use the stairs, and anybody using a mobility device would use the ramp. Universal design would be where that whole path of travel is on a grade and is sloped to the front entrance. And this way, regardless of your level of ability, whether you use a mobility device or you don't use a mobility device, if you're ambulatory, everybody uses the exact same path, which is the sloped ramp. And then further to that point, when you get to the front entrance, typically you'll have 4 doors that are quote unquote regular doors, and on one end you'll have a push button for a door. That is accessible design, where you have ambulatory people and then people with accessibility needs use the push button. Universal design would have sliding doors on a sensor. So anybody that pulls up to that front entrance, the sensor would pick them up, the sliding doors would open, and everybody goes through the same, uses the door in the same fashion. So we get this question a lot, what is RHF, but we need code. So code is just a starting point. It's the bare minimum. And then the RHFAC rating is an overlay to any code, whether it's municipal, whether it's provincial code or national code. It's meant as best practice for accessibility. They're recommendations, they're not a standard. And it lets you score a building so that you can compare one building's accessibility to another building's accessibility with a score sort of, and compare apples to apples. It's roughly anywhere between 1,200 to 1,800 questions that we go through when we do an RHFAC rating. There are some things that are prerequisites that you must have in order to pass, and all the remainder items we can score on a sliding scale of 0 to 5. So if you don't have the exact counter height, you don't have the exact clearance in front of a sink, you can get a 4 out of 5, a 3 out of 5. You can even get a 0 out of 5 on some things and still receive a passing mark of 60% or greater. And for this reason, we think that when you're in the MLI Select program, it's easier to go with the column of the Rick Hansen report than it is to go with trying to satisfy 15% of the units for CSA or 15% of the units for universal design.
Sorry, Chris, just to clarify for people who are watching, RHFAC, that stands for Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility. What's
certification?
Certification. Okay. And I see questions that are coming up. I guess the codes that you're mentioning in the presentation could be easily found online through the CSA website.
The codes?
The CSA B652 and 23.
Yeah. I'm not sure if they're free, but you should be able to download the PDF for CSA B651 and 2-23. Through their website.
So to answer the question, and I should have mentioned this early on, we will have a copy of this PDF presentation with the replay available within the next 24 to 48 hours. You will receive an email, and we can have this for the record. Sorry, Chris, go on, please.
Yeah. There are some minimum requirements that you'll need to reach level 1 and your 20 points when you're doing a Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility certification. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's something to give you an idea of what we're looking for. And this will be required in 15% of the units. These units are, if you're in Ontario and it's OBC, these units will be the same units as the OBC units. And these units will have the following: 860 millimeter opening doors at the front entrance, washroom, and bedroom. Structural reinforcement behind the toilet and the shower area. That's for the future installation of grab bars. You don't necessarily need to have them right off the hop. That same structural reinforcement in the bedroom closet. That allows you to lower the clothes rod in these units if needed. Or if you have adjustable shelves, you can use the adjustable shelf, wire rack shelving, and then you don't need the structural reinforcement. A 1500 millimeter turning circle in the main washroom, or whatever the minimum is for code. A handset that's in the shower fixture, that's a flexible hose. And then the flooring finish to continue underneath the kitchen cabinetry, as well as underneath the washroom vanity. And this is for, in the future, if you wanted to convert this unit, you could use conventional cabinetry in the kitchen and conventional vanity in the washroom. And if you needed to convert it to an accessible unit, the idea is that you could remove the doors underneath the kitchen sink and remove the kick plate. And now you have knee clearance at the kitchen sink without having to call a flooring guy. And the same thing is true in the washroom. You could remove the vanity and replace it with a pedestal style sink or a standoff sink and not have to call a tile setter. Some other items are the addition of a lower viewfinder at the front entrance door, a 120 volt rough-in at the front entrance of these 15% units, and that's for the future installation of a power door opener. And then one of the units will need to be built as fully accessible as a proof of concept. So that means that one unit will get knee clearance at the sink, kitchen sink, knee clearance at the cooktop, knee clearance at the washroom sink, and a roll-in shower. Excuse me.
Sorry, Chris, I see some questions coming up. If the audience, please, if you guys have any questions, please just put it in the text box there, in the chat box, and I'll try to interrupt Chris as we go, and we'll answer the questions. Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
We're going to attach the complete list of requirements for level 1 after this presentation, with this presentation as well. Level 2 is 30 points, and this requires that 20% of your units are accessible or easily adaptable. As in the previous requirements, only one unit needed to be built as proof of concept and fully accessible. For level 2, you'll need one of each variant. So one bedroom, one 2-bedroom, one 3-bedroom, one bachelor. You don't need to have a 1-bedroom with a den, a 1-bedroom without a den, a 2-bedroom with a den. So just one of each variant. Visual strobe fire alarms in the unit, the 20% of the units, and in the bedroom, I believe that's OBC. You'll need accessible parking with protected space. A hearing loop at the front reception desk if you have one. A hearing loop is something that lets a person with hearing loss connect directly to the person behind the desk, and it eliminates all the ambient noise. Tactile indicators at the top of stairwells. One universal washroom somewhere in the building, and then signage that includes braille and raised tactile characters. So, and that will be on the unit signage, wall signage, evacuation signage, and the last one is blade signage. Blade signage does not require braille or raised characters, and blade signage sticks out perpendicular from the wall. When you're looking down a hall, you can see that there's a mail room, a parcel room, a laundry room, without actually having to go all the way down that hall to see what's at that door.
So, Chris, a couple of questions that are coming up. I know you're going to talk about the visitable requirements down the road and for different levels, so I'm going to leave it at that. But there's another question that just came up about parking requirements. What if, like right now, City of Toronto, you don't necessarily need to have parking on projects. So if you don't have a parking spot in your building, does that mean that you do not get any of these points?
So for level 1, it's not a prerequisite, but if you're going for level 2 and there's no parking, then you'll be scored as not applicable. But we do highly suggest that you at least include a drop-off area. So if you're not going to have any parking associated to the building, for level 2, at the very least, have a lay-by or something at the entrance that somebody can be safely dropped off.
Thank you.
So this program, there's essentially 3 types of units, and I'm going to be speaking about OBC, but I guess it can also apply to the National Building Code. OBC is Ontario Building Code. So the first type of unit is an OBC unit. Also, and this is going to be 15% of the units will be considered adaptable. And those are the OBC units. The next type of unit is a visitable unit, and the visitable unit is the remaining units in the building. And finally, the third one is fully accessible, or the proof of concept unit. This fully accessible unit will be built into the first point of the OBC units. So those are the 3 types of units. The Rick Hansen rating will be applied to the 15% accessible units, and the CSA B652 will be applied to the visitable units. So those are the 2 different requirements that are applied to the 2 separate types of units.
Sorry, Chris, before you move on, maybe just can maybe clarify the concept of the adaptable unit?
So the adaptable unit is, like I mentioned, some of the features, things like the flooring finish to continue underneath the kitchen cabinets and underneath the vanity. You can have what is a normal ambulatory unit, and when it comes time for somebody with accessibility needs to move in there, or as someone ages in place and they require knee clearance, you can adapt that unit. You can remove the kitchen cabinet doors, you can remove the kick plate, and the flooring finish is already there. You have knee clearance that's adaptable. And same in the washroom, you can remove the vanity and replace it with a pedestal, such as I mentioned earlier, without having to call a tile setter. Another point of adaptable is having this structural reinforcement behind the toilet and in the shower. You don't have to install the grab bars, but if and when that time comes, you can install them and adapt that unit to become more accessible. So that's where it's already got the infrastructure baked into the basics of the unit. It will already have the 1500 millimeter turning circle, where the visitable.
Sorry, the assumption is that basically those 15% of units, and these are from the questions I'm just reading to you, those 15% are also visitable plus the 85%, right? Like the assumption is that the 15% OBC already meet the visitable requirements because
Correct.
they're already right. Okay.
Yeah,
And
there's
another.
It's already baked in from OBC.
Gotcha. And there's another question that came up, that if you do provide parking spots for the building, presumably permanent parking spots, do they need to follow some sort of ratio? Or, for example, if you have a 60-unit building, if you only have one accessible parking spot, is that good enough, or do you need to follow a certain ratio?
Yeah, so the RHFAC, as I mentioned earlier, is not a standard. It's best practice. So with parking, you would need to follow code. And then further to that, you need to follow your municipality requirements. So those usually are more stringent than what code is.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm seeing a lot of questions about the visitable units. They want to know more details, which I believe you have.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the visitable.
Yes,
I
we're gonna
saved
get.
the meat and potatoes for a few more slides.
Yes.
Okay, so these are the top 5 things that you need to consider that are going to affect the footprint of each of the units. So these are going to determine how big your units are, if your project is viable for this program, and ultimately affect, I guess, cost per square foot. So 15% of your units will need to include a 1500 millimeter turning circle. Apologies for the typo. It says tiny circle, but it's a turning circle. That'll be corrected when you guys, when we send this out. The same 15% of the units will need an 850 millimeter clear opening door at the front entrance, bathroom, and 1 bedroom. The remaining 85% of the units will need to satisfy the visitability requirement. We're going to get into that. And 1 unit will need to be built as fully accessible. And if you have a universal washroom, that will require a 2100 millimeter turning circle. The rest of your design will still need to include a whole list of the things that we spoke about earlier, but these are the ones that are going to affect space and footprint. And again, the comprehensive list will also be shared after this presentation. Okay, what is visitable? So visitable is, can a person using a mobility device essentially visit you? Can they get into your unit? So that means no step getting through the front door of any units of throughout the whole building. So a wheelchair needs to be able to cross through the front door. An 860 millimeter clear width opening front entrance door. The washroom must be on a visitable level. So if your unit is 2 levels and you have bedrooms upstairs, that's fine as long as there's a washroom on that main floor. An 860 millimeter outward opening door or a pocket door in that visitable washroom. And then the word least should not be in there, but at least a 1200 millimeter path of travel from the front door to the washroom and living room. And then 1200 millimeters up to and in front of the toilet inside that visitable washroom. So visitable is not a good fit for townhomes that go up or down from the sidewalk. It's not good for townhomes that have landings inside. 4-plex projects and 5-plexes, which the City of Toronto is trying to promote. Now I think it's 6-plex because those typically one or all of those units have stairs. And then again, this garden studio that has steps. So those are typically not a good fit. Is there some questions that you want to get to?
A whole bunch of questions. Okay, so I'll go back. I'll start with the parking question. It keeps coming up. So I'll read the question word for word to you. If you do provide parking, then what is the rate per unit that is acceptable? Is there a criteria for that?
There's a criteria with the CSA, within the CSA B652-23. There's a chart and a ratio. That will only come into play if you're selecting to apply the CSA prescription your units. But if you're looking to go the Rick Hansen approach, yes, we highly recommend that you also follow that same table, but that's something that we can score on a sliding scale. So if you don't have the exact ratio of units to parking spots, you won't get a 5 out of 5. You'll get a 4 out of 5, 3 out of 5, maybe a 0 out of 5, but it will still allow you to pass, provided that you are still satisfying whatever requirements from the municipality.
So the next question is, can you elaborate on why the universal washroom requires a 2100 turning radius and not the 1700 that is required by the AC?
That is the new requirement in CSA B651-23, and like I said, code is a minimum, and the CSA is a higher standard, and that's what they're looking for, and that's what the CMHC is requiring.
Question here that might be hearsay, but they're saying that we've heard that you don't need to show the turning radius in the washrooms anymore. Is that correct? Have you come across that?
You need to show the turning circle within the 15% of the OBC units. You do not need to show a turning circle in the visitable units. The visitable units only need 1200 millimeters up to and in front of the toilet.
Gotcha. So some of these questions are a little longer, so I'm going to just read them. Is that RFAC rating need to be adjudicated to say that the project is able to get 60 or 79 or above score? Like maybe talk about the adjudication process or certification.
Yeah, we can. That's the last slide, but
Okay.
it's yeah. I'll speak to that at the end.
Okay. So it's another question or comment is, so essentially 100% of the units in the building need to be accessible essentially. I think the answer is they need to be 100% visitable, not necessarily accessible, right?
Right. So accessible requires turning circles, requires structural reinforcement behind the drywall. That it requires wider doors at the bedroom. Visitable does not require a turning circle, does not require the backing, and it does not require the bedroom door to be wider. So there are some stark differences between visitable and accessible.
It's a lighter version, basically.
Yeah.
Another question here is basic. So they're saying basically you cannot get accessibility points under CMHC if you're doing multiplex projects because they can't get 100% visible units. I think that's what you say as well, right?
Correct. Unless they incorporate something like a Lula lift, limited use, limited access, which goes up and down 3 floors, or they put an elevator in to their multiplex, then that'll work.
That's extra measures, basically.
Yeah.
And I see Dina made a note here that the 2100 millimeters is just for the common spaces. I believe she's referring to the circle, the 10 turning radius in the universal washroom.
That's within the universal washroom. Yeah. Oh, just that's for the common area universal washroom. Nothing to do with the units.
Common area.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. That's it for now. Maybe move on.
All right. Here is an accessible kitchen layout. So you have the heights, you have the clearance in front, things like a refrigerator with parallel doors. What we don't want is a refrigerator with the freezer on top. We prefer either the parallel doors with the horizontal, the vertical parallel doors, or a freezer on the bottom. And then on the image on the right, you'll see that there's a cooktop with knee clearance. And then further to the right of that image, there's an oven. And the item that says C is a hot plate shelf. So when you open that oven, you could take, if you're using a wheelchair, you could place that hot plate onto that shelf, readjust yourself, and then move it to the counter. And then this is kind of a real world look at what an accessible kitchen looks like. Doesn't have to look clinical. So you'll see the image on the left. There's the freezer on the bottom and the refrigerator on top. These are for the adaptable units that need these types of appliances. This will be on the checklist that we provide. Then you have a cooktop with knee clearance. There should be a gable there hiding the wire. This was a brand new kitchen, and they're still finished doing some final touches. Also, you can't see well from this image, but at the front of that millwork, there's an on-off switch that turns on the exhaust fan. So one of the requirements is that the microwave not be mixed in with the exhaust fan. So the microwave's on the counter. The exhaust fan is a standalone unit with a switch at the front of the cabinetry. And then moving on over to the sink, you have knee clearance again. Also missing the gable to hide the plumbing.
All right, Chris, can you talk about balconies as well? I know you and I on a different project, you and I have had this conversation. Balconies, amenity spaces, how do those tie to the visitable definition?
So the balconies in the barrier-free units, 15% of the units, they all need to be accessible. So a wheelchair user needs to be able to get out there, roll over the threshold. What the actual number that they're calling for is 13 millimeters. Sometimes that's difficult to achieve. And we can use like a threshold that goes from 0 to 2 inches or 3 inches to help you roll out and roll in units. That's something that we can score accordingly for our RHF. So visitable.
What about the visitable units?
The
85%, the rest of the 85% who are designated as visitable and may or may not have balconies, I guess, do you need to be able to access the balconies with a wheelchair?
Ideally, yes, but what it mentions in the requirement is the living room and the bathroom. So as per the way that it's written in the requirements, I would say no, but you should always try to make them visitable so you can sit out there with your friend if they're using a mobility device.
So there's another question that do visible units need to have a 1.7 by 1.7 meter free space inside the front door? I think they're referring to like a 1.1, like the square for turning the wheelchair. 1.7 by
visitable units, they just require a 1200 millimeter clear path of travel from the front door to the washroom. And the idea is that if you're visiting that unit, somebody would open the door for you to allow you in. So that's the direction that we have from the CMHC, that the visitable units need a 1200 millimeter path of travel.
Question for best practices, which I know you have a slide at the end, so we'll answer that question toward the end of conversation. Chris has some highlights. Thank you.
Okay. So here's some missed opportunities. This is the same unit with that really nice kitchen. The image on the left is the bench with the grab bars. And then the image in the middle is that same shower. And you can see where the controls are. You know, they have a beautiful roll-in shower with all the grab bars and a fold-down seat, but there's absolutely no way to use that seat, to sit on that seat and use the controls. So those controls should have been on the long wall right beside the bench. So these are some things that, you know, yeah, it's accessible, but they need to be conveyed to the installers so they know why they're putting things where they're supposed to go. And then the image on the right is a stackable washer dryer, and you can see that the controls are all the way at the top. If you're going to use a stackable washer dryer, the recommendation is that you find a model that has the controls that are in the middle, so that somebody could load this machine. Even though it looks like it's high, the dryer portion of this door is roughly 1200, 1500 millimeters AFF. So have those controls for the dryer and the washer at the middle of the unit. And here's some more examples. So you see the image on the left has the dryer controls as a knob, and washing machine controls are touch screen, and they're all on the bottom. The middle unit is the same thing. Everything's loaded through all the controls are in the middle. And then the image on the right is not acceptable. That's got the controls for the dryer all the way at the top. And here are some simple things that you can think of. This is a parking garage, the image on the left. Just something like a simple coat of paint can make the emergency exit that much easier to find when everything else is gray. And then you can see the image on the right. It's just white and all glass. Would be you add some smoke, a little bit of chaos, and somebody with vision loss could have a hard time finding where that exit is. And that's just a simple coat of paint. Wayfinding. This is a hotel in Niagara Falls. It's the Hilton, and then you can see right incorporated into their design. Well, to some people it might just look like a funky design. It's actually wayfinding, and if you follow those stripes, they take you directly to the elevators, and the other way they take you directly to the front desk. So you have a identified path right from the accessible door at the front entrance to the reception desk, and then from the reception desk to the elevators. And this is where design and accessibility can blend into each other rather nicely and not look so institutional. Here are some easy wins for your site. Make it easy to identify from the street, so big numbers, signage, name of the building. Use contrasting colors. So I know a lot of designers like to do white walls and white floors and white ceilings and white doors. Try to get some contrast in there. So if you have a darker floor on the flooring finish, continue that darker color through the door frame, and then you can use a lighter color door and lighter color walls. A mirror on the back of the elevator. That helps people with mobility devices back up if they can't turn around in the elevator. It also helps for safety for maybe somebody that's elderly. They can see who's getting to the elevator behind them, and if they're not comfortable, they don't have to get into the elevator. Switching the flat bar handrail in an elevator to a round handrail. That's easier for people to grab than the flat bar. If you finish the elevator floor in a light color rather than a dark color people with vision loss perceive that as a hole. So just switching the color of the flooring finish in the elevator helps with people with vision loss. And then a signage package. We're looking for 4 types of signage. Unit signage that has Braille and raised characters. Wall signage that has Braille and raised characters. Wall signage says unit 101 to 110 this way, 111 to 120 that way. Evacuation signage to have Braille and raised characters. And then blade signage. And I spoke about what blade signage is. It sticks out perpendicular from the wall and allows you to look down the hall, not actually have to walk all the way in case you have limited mobility to see what's at that door. And then finally, the use of a column button for power door openers. I know after COVID, there was a huge push to use wave sensors, but those are not recommended for accessibility. They're very difficult for people with vision loss to find them and understand how they work and what they need to do. And they tend to be unreliable. I mean, I'm sure everybody's ran into a wave sensor that doesn't work. So push button, but best practice would be a 3-foot column button that people can access with their hips, their knee. If they're a mobility device user, they can bump into it with their foot plate. Process and timeline. So we send out an intake form. You complete the intake form. From there, we prepare a proposal. Once the proposal has been accepted, you'd register your site with the Rick Hansen Foundation if that's the route that you were taking. There's a $500 fee to register your site with the Rick Hansen Foundation. And then you'd forward all the drawings and information to somebody on the Handy Help team. From there, they need approximately 2 weeks to do their work, 2 to 3 weeks. Once their work is complete, they submit the report to the Rick Hansen Foundation for adjudication. The client would then pay a $1,250 adjudication fee. There's about a 4-week adjudication process, so 20 working days. Once the adjudicator is satisfied, there's going to be some back and forth between Handy Help and the adjudicator. He might say, oh, these points are too high, these points are too low, I need a picture of this. So once he's satisfied and certifies the report, you would then take your certified report and Handy Help will sign the attestation once our invoice has been cleared. And then you take these 2 pieces of documents, the certified report and the attestation, and submit those to your CMHC file to your underwriter. And the whole process takes 6 to 8 weeks, start to finish. So if you work backwards as to when you need your financing, that'll give you the latest date that we can start our work. We do offer different services for your project, and those will all be outlined in the proposal.
So Chris, I want to kind of go through the questions for a second. So one of the questions is that what is the latest Rick Hansen criteria date? Is it an updated version recently that you're aware of?
The most recent version is version 4, and that the version 4 lines up with B651-23, and the version 3 lines up with B651-18. If your project starts with the version 3, it'll finish all the way through as version 3. Any new projects will all be applied to the version 4 standard.
Question about how hard are you finding these requirements to be met on your projects, and very specifically about the 1200 path of travel and also in front of the toilet. I know you and I have looked at a couple of jobs together, and it's not easy. It's not easy. At least that's my take on it. But you have more successful examples.
Yeah, we find that most people can get their head around the requirements for the 15% accessible units and the 1500 millimeter turning circle. They can even build into the design the 1200 path of travel from the front door to the washroom. The hardest part is the 1200 millimeters up to and in front of the toilet in the visitable units. Now, if there's 1 or 2 units that you just simply cannot get there, we always aim and suggest you go for 100%. But the CMHC is reasonable, and if 1 or 2 units don't meet that, it's more than likely still going to be accepted. And also, if you're short maybe 100 mil or 50 mil, provided we can show the specs of your toilet and that we can use the toe clearance underneath the toilet to reach that 1200 millimeter clearance. And the same toe clearance can be used at the vanity if we need to include that in the 1200. But we'll have to evidence the toilet specifically and show how much toe clearance there's from the base to the tip of the bowl.
Is there a post-construction process for validating that this building has actually been built to those spec?
Yeah, great question. So all the pre-construction jobs typically are for construction loan. Once your building receives occupancy and transitions from construction loan to long-term stabilized mortgage, then we will need to go on site and repeat this whole process, a new proposal, new timeline, and do a new rating, and essentially go through the whole 6 to 8 week process all over again. This
So
is
you will
very
basically go on site and start checking all those units, the visible requirements and time occupancy.
Yes, we do the whole report, except this time we're taking pictures, measurements, and that is what's going to be provided to the adjudicator and to the underwriter at the CMHC. Yeah, it's duplicated, and we don't combine these in the beginning unless you specifically ask for it, because some projects take 18 months to complete, some take 3 years, some take 5 years. So it's very difficult to see what projects and what stage they're at. So we break it up into 2 different proposals.
There's a question about the process, and basically the question is, if Handy Help is certified by Rick Hansen and you guys are providing the report, why is there a need for another entity to adjudicate after this is done? I don't know if that's a fair question to ask you, but
yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, it's transparency, right? So if the client is paying Handy Help, it's sort of a conflict of interest for us to write a report that's going to be negative towards them. So the adjudicator is a third party that looks into it, that can certify that our work is in fact true and what we're attesting to is actually included in the design. So it just adds transparency and more credibility to the program.
is there a design manual with drawings and dimensions that could explain this requirement?
Which requirement is that?
All the things that we just talked about. Is there just a manual that outside of the standards that you were mentioning?
So everything that I spoke about can be found in B651-23 and B652-23, with the exception of the CMHC has defaulted to the visitable requirements as an accessible path of travel. So they're taking the accessible path of travel in B652 and they're applying that to the units interior and up to and in front of the toilet. That's the only one that you're not going to find how to apply it. From what I hear, they're coming out with a clarification, but as of yet, they haven't come out with anything like that. That's the only one that you're not going to find.
There's a question, which is a good question. I don't know if you can answer this. They're asking are you aware of any studies, empirical studies that have been done in terms of cost benefit and potential impact of all these changes from 2018 to 2023 on the actual cost side of things?
Yeah. If somebody wants to, they have been done. The Rick Hansen Foundation has done this cost benefit. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think it adds either a dollar per square foot or a very, very minimal, if any, cost to the unit to do these changes, to make these considerations right from the design stage. But I can provide that report if somebody wants to email me directly. I can have access to that from the Rick Hansen site and send that to them.
Thank you. That on the construction side of it, we're not really adding that much cost to the building per se. It's more so on potentially losing some efficiency on the floor plans and like having to incorporate some stuff in earlier on in the process. I want to be cognizant of the time. We have about 5 minutes left. We're going through pretty much all the questions. I don't know if you have, I think you have one more slide there, or that was it. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to share with us. Like I mentioned, this is part of the first part of a 3-part series. So our next webinar is scheduled for September 10th. I'll put the link in the chat, which you can go there directly and registering right now. It's the same process, free for everyone. And also we will send out updates in terms of slides and the resources that we talked about. We will provide that with the next, I want to say 2 days, with the replay, which you can share with your team. I see there's one more question. I think that's the same question. I just have repeated. They're the manuals. So there's no. You're saying there's no necessarily a manual to have all the dimensions and drawings. People need to standard.
The manual is the CSA B651 and B652-23. There's drawings in there about everything we spoke about, with the exception on how to apply the visitable path of travel to a unit. Everything else is in that standard.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone else.
Thanks,
If
everyone.
you want to, please show the slide with the contact information. Sure. We'll send this out later. Again, you'll have access to all of these, but that's Chris's contact information. Feel free to reach out to him directly. And yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.